Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you very much for coming along to our conference today. I'm Eugene Clark, I'm chair of the campaign, and I'll be helping us, I hope, through the process. We have 5 speakers today, and in order to keep things moving quite smoothly, any questions will be kept until the end of the final speaker. So it might be the case that something occurs to you, jot down a wee note of it before we get there. Now, although we have a number of speakers lined up, we also have a little interactive section, shall we say, which will, we hope, engender ideas for making the rail line a reality. And because it's interactive, I think we should have another wee bit of interaction. So I'd like everyone to stand up, please. It's all right, I'm not going to get you to do physical exercise. If you could all stand up, please. Keep standing if you came here mainly by public transport. If you did not come by public transport, sit down. Thank you. So I think thank you very much, just if everyone can sit down. My rough calculation shows that about 93% of the people present chose not to take public transport. And this to an area from which we can see the capital of our country and our Scotland's Parliament. And that maybe sends a wee simple message about the importance of improving links here. We'll go on now to our first speaker. It's David Shirres. David is a noted rail engineer who has advised a number of governments, including the Russian one. I almost said Soviet there, David, sorry. And he's also editor of Rail Engineer magazine, seen very much as one of the experts in its field. David's going to be reviewing if you want, the technical aspects of the case, and also give a little background to the campaign booklet. So can I ask you to welcome David Shirres?
Thank you, Eugene. I always feel a bit embarrassed when I get promoted as a rail expert. As I hope to explain, there's a lot of other rail professionals who've been very supportive of this campaign, who've made some positive inputs to it. Just before I start, one thing just to point out about my title there, Reinstating Levenmouth. I think one of the things to be clear is that, if I can get this thing to work, is that it's not closed yet. This railway is not closed yet. And as evidence of this, there is a Network Rail sign advising people where to phone if there's a bridge strike in case of risk to passing trains. So, you know, there's evidence it's in Network Rail's ownership. That's a serious point because there's no issues with land and it is an operational railway, which does help greatly. The other point I'd like to make, if we move on, for those sitting maybe at the back, you might not have seen this, but the apostrophe there is very significant. I've called this the professional's view. It's not my view, it's a collective view. Hence the apostrophe is at the end. A minor detail, but punctuation obviously makes all the difference. Moving on, just a little bit about myself. When I retired from Network Rail in now 2009, I was working on the Airdrie Bathgate project, so I know a little bit about what it takes to reopen a railway. By a pure coincidence, really, I started writing for Rail Engineer magazine, and my first article was on the Airdrie Bathgate Railway. So it was quite interesting interviewing my ex-boss for a magazine article within 6 months of leaving. And after that, I wrote quite a number of articles on the Borders Railway. And then my then editor at the time said, well, could you write an article about what's going to happen after Borders? And I wrote this article, After Borders, What's Next? And I looked at every single reopening campaign throughout the entire UK. And there was one website with about 150 reopening campaigns on it. And I thought there's an issue there about management of expectations, because clearly one has to look at what's realistic and what's not. And it was in writing that article I first really became aware of this campaign, because frankly it was probably one of a handful of campaigns that really had a strong case and deserved to succeed. And it was because of that I got involved in the campaign. I got involved in producing the Levenmouth booklet, and as Eugene hinted, I have connections with Russia that I'm still proud of, despite the political situation of the time. But moving on, a bit about the booklet. There's a lot of really good information in the previous stag reports about the case for Levenmouth. However, those reports total 784 pages, so it's quite difficult to get the overview. It is really difficult to get the overview. We saw around middle last year a booklet that Campaign for Borders Rail had produced, and as with all good ideas, you're not ashamed to copy them. And in June, after the petition had been handed into government and the response basically was, well, you need to strengthen your business case, we thought, or we suggested to the campaign, it'd be a good idea to produce a similar booklet to the Borders one that actually had the case succinctly in a small booklet. And that was how this, the booklet that you have on the tables was born. And if I could move on a bit about the booklet. I'm a member of a group called the Retired Railway Officers of Scotland. We actually call ourselves the Old Buffers. We're not that actually pedantic or whatever. But there's some people in there for whom I've got a massive respect, who've got particular expertise in railway operations, project management, including a number who are quite senior figures on the Borders project management team, who all put their input into that booklet. And that booklet is actually the consensus view of all those engineers and all those professionals. That was quite difficult because there were some quite differing views that had to be reconciled to the satisfaction of all concerned. And not only that, the professionals, being professionals, insisted that the booklet clearly identified all the issues. It wasn't just about the good things. There's some quite difficult things about reopening a railway, and it was important that those are stressed. So it gives a balanced view, and I think that makes it really quite a credible document as a result. And as I say, that's not me, that's because of this expertise that was pushed into it. And by a happy coincidence, the booklet was finalised a few days before the Scottish Parliament debate, and we even got a commendation from our Transport Minister that the booklet was a really helpful contribution. So it's good to see that. And those were the key points that came out of it. I mean, quite a number of issues in it, but those are the key points that I'd just like to briefly go through, which I'm sure some of the other speakers will then expand on. If we could go to the next slide. The connectivity comparison, I think, is quite interesting. Railways are all, throughout their history, railways have been an absolute catalyst for economic development and created wealth. And so if you can provide connectivity, you will succeed and generally support an area. The Borders Railway, which was opened in 2015, at today's prices, construction cost of 350 million, was 30 miles long, and you've got a population of 26,000 people at one end and 29,000 people at the other end. Levenmouth is about 6 miles long, construction cost well under that, and will offer comparable benefits. A lot of people quite rightly talk about the benefits that the Borders will bring, including, of course, the Scottish Government. That was a decision that was taken 12 years ago. This, hopefully, will be a decision that will be taken fairly soon, but I think that shows the comparative benefits in connectivity terms. And if we could turn now to construction cost, I mean, one of the things about the closed railway here is that there's no major structures to worry about. Those are a couple of photographs of some really major work that had to be done on Borders to enable the railway to be built. The other thing is there may be some land that needs to be purchased for maybe around the stations or whatever, but it's quite minimal compared with some of the other Borders schemes. And also utility work, which is a really high cost item. Probably likely to be minimal because the track bed is there and there's no significant bridge work to be done. So significantly reduced cost in that respect. And what we did was look at the work breakdown structure, what it actually takes to build a railway. And there's lots and lots of stuff. Building or reopening a railway or reinstating a railway is not cheap. So those are all the various things. And then what we did was we looked at all those items and made the comparison with borders. And as you can see there, the deep green is where it really doesn't apply. Light green, less expensive cost. Some things are unknowns that we've got in orange there. Costs likely to be similar. And in a few cases, Levenmouth will be more expensive. Borders had 30 miles of track, therefore you got some quite good economies of scale about laying track. You won't have those same economies on the Levenmouth line. And that's what that comparison showed. And the consensus view of certainly those who were involved in the Borders project was that the construction cost per mile would be of the order of between 50 and 75% of Borders project, which gives you, in today's prices, a total cost between 37 and 56 million in terms of construction costs, which you could say in the overall scheme of things is not a huge amount of money, but it's a significant amount of money. The other thing that we considered was the timetable. I'm an engineer, I'm not a railway operator, and one of the things that I learnt when we did this booklet was that there are some quite significant but quite doable timetable issues. But the key point, the consensus, was it should be possible to provide Leven with a half-hourly service to Edinburgh in a journey time of about an hour. If freight's going to be carried, that might have some impact on that service. Moving on. Freight, clearly there's potential for freight. The booklet gives an indication of the amount of freight that is likely to be carried, and the view of all concerned was that it would be cost effective for Diageo to actually have a freight terminal. And then we looked at wider economic benefits. The rail link is the only way to put Levenmouth about an hour from Edinburgh. All the issues really probably well known about the wider benefits, but the point was the Stag report mentioned those benefits but didn't quantify them, whereas in contrast other projects have had wider economic benefits quantified. Initially, when the Borders Railway was approved, it had a benefit cost ratio of less than 1, but when you include the wider economic benefits, it goes up. Similarly with the road schemes, the A9 dualling, interestingly enough, the wider economic benefits there include a value placed on driver frustration, not driver time, driver frustration. So, you know, it's important to try and quantify what economic benefits you can, and I'm sure that that's being progressed now. Land value capture is an interesting one. One of the things that used to frustrate me when I worked on Airdrie Bathgate was we're doing all this work and the developers were going to benefit from it. Obviously, house prices going up, but they didn't put a penny into it. And there are means of actually capturing land value that will increase once the railway is open to help fund such a scheme. And that was actually stressed there. That's Armadale Station in the image below, a massive development around the new railway. Moving on. And one of the things also that was clear was that Tweedbank and Borders, the actual demand for travel at Tweedbank was 750% more than forecast. That's because, I mean, everybody expected it, but the actual demand for a railhead that was an hour from Edinburgh was massive. And the car park there was absolutely overwhelmed within the first day. Here, a railhead would obviously provide a huge benefit for the Eastern UK, including for tourism. And you know, you can't get to some of these villages because there's no place to park because everybody comes out and parks there. You know, there's clearly benefits there, and I'm sure that'll be stressed later. So to conclude, what Humza said in Parliament in the debate on the 27th of September, and he's quite right, is there's got to be an absolutely robust business case and the rationale has to be scrutinised to the nth degree. So the question is, does the Stag, which actually understates benefits and overstates cost, with the addition of the points made in the booklet, does that make a credible business case. And I hope today we will discover that that is the case. Thanks for your attention, everybody.